Hey, this is photographer Michael Zagaris, and you are listening to Jim on Bass. Don't get picked off.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base Show. For today's very special guest, we have on one of the most iconic photographers out there, especially in the Bay Area. He's covered World Series, Super Bowls, All-Star games, and some of rock and roll's biggest moments. Some of his books include Total Excess and Field of Play. His work has been on the covers of Time Magazine and Sports Illustrated. Please welcome the great Michael Zagaris. Michael, thanks for coming on.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. And I think you were at the eye doctor earlier today, right? So did everything go good? Or
No, I'm going to the eye doctor tomorrow. I was
okay.
at my age, you've got your physicals, you've got all the stuff you have to keep doing what you're doing. And many people will tell you they thought I would have been dead 25, 30 years ago. So,
Well, you're doing something right then.
yeah. As Mickey Mantle once said, if I thought I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself.
Well, it's great to have you on because I've always recognized you from since I was a kid, going to games, whether it was regular season, spring training, football games, baseball. You were always the guy I recognized with the camera and the hat on backwards.
You know what? I feel like I've always been fortunate that what I do, while it's a job, it's not really a job. It's my play. I feel like I've never had to work because I love what I do. And I've been lucky to have actually grown up in the Valley, in the Bay Area, at a time when, in many ways, both in terms of music on the one hand, culture, sports, we went through an incredible renaissance. And I was there to both capture it on the one hand with the camera, but live it with the experiences and the friendships and the excitement and the ups and the downs.
I know you've lived in San Francisco. Are you still in the Haight? Have you been there all these years, or?
Yeah, I've been in the Haight since '73.
Wow.
And, when I first moved in, I got a place right above Frederick on Ashbury Street.
Mm.
My landlord was Michael McClure, the poet, although at the time I didn't know who he was. He may have been more broke than me, if that was possible. He owned the building. Somebody in his wife's family had died. They used money they got from them to get the building. At that point in the Haight, all the three-story Victorians were for sale. And when I say all, it was almost all of them.
Wow.
You could get a three-story Victorian that was usually built between 1890 and 1910 for between 28 and 35 grand with a 3.25 federally insured wrap loan. I had a one bedroom with a big fireplace and then another room about 3 times as big in a backyard for $190 a month rent.
Wow.
And you know what? People said, well, you got in at the right time, so you probably bought a house. I said, bought a house? I said, I was always 2 and 3 months late paying the rent. So 28 to 35,000, that might as well have been 28 to 35 million for me. So no, I didn't buy a house. I'm still in the neighborhood. I still rent. I've got a great landlord. I've got a great deal. And, I live here renting rather than somewhere else and owning because I've loved it here. I've always wanted to be in the city. I love this neighborhood. And I think that's more important than owning in a place where I wouldn't want to be, where I didn't like the headspace.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, yeah,
Well, you're also living the grandpa life, right? So how many grandkids do you have?
two, got a granddaughter that's a sophomore in high school, grandson that's in the 6th grade in junior high school, both
Okay,
in North Hollywood.
nice. And your son, right? Is it Ari? Is that how you say it?
All right, right.
And do you have any other kids, or is he your only
No,
son?
no, he's our only son. He's now working coaching travel ball for the Garcia Paras and working part time for the Dodgers.
Wow. Okay.
He stayed in sports. For a while, he was an actor.
Mm.
He did that for 12 years in LA, and then got tired and wanted to segue back into baseball, which was his first love. He went to school on a baseball scholarship, so you know it all comes full circle.
He's working for the enemy, though.
Uh, you know what? If you're in sports, whoever you're working for, that's your team. And
Yeah.
only fans have this, enemy, all that.
Yeah, that's true. And I know you were born in Chicago, but like you said, you moved to Modesto as a toddler, right? And then maybe came of age in Reading. Is that how it went?
We moved to Modesto, from Modesto to Hanford, from Hanford to Stockton. We moved to Stockton in 1951. I was 6 years old.
Mm.
I was there until 1957. At that point in time, Stockton was working class, middle class. It was a great place to grow up. That was pre-gang bang and
Mm.
all the bullshit that went on for quite a long time in Stockton. So, and I loved Stockton because we were in the valley. We were centrally located. We had the Stockton ports. We had College Pacific. They've since dropped football. They were always good. The 1956 team, they sent 11 guys to the NFL.
Wow.
People like Dick Bass, Tom Flores, John Nisby, Clyde Connor. I could go on, but it was, and then we would see two or three Stanford games a year, two or three 49er games. I mean, it was great. It was exciting.
Well, yeah, you speak about what Stockton had back then, and you forgot the biggest one. They had Chris Isaac, right?
It's funny. When I lived in Stockton, that was before Chris was born. And Chris and I became friends when he moved here in 1980, 81. And at that point in time, he lived on 48th Street in a garage. I mean, he had a little, he was renting a garage. When you went to visit him, you had to go in the side door. He had his bed, racks of clothes, and his record albums. So you had to like walk, kind of walk sideways past the clothes and sit on the end of the bed. So Chris ended up at that point in time, he would babysit for us a lot. And he loved it because he had no money, very little food. So he had a full refrigerator. And when we split, he had a free telephone, as I would find out when I get my phone bill. Like, what the fuck? What is this?
Oh, that's awesome. So I imagine you've remained friends through the years and kind of have a full
Yeah.
circle relationship. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, Chris still has a place here in Seacliff, although
Mm.
he doesn't live there that much. He also has a new place in Nashville, big house
Mm.
with a guest room in the back. And I mean, he's still touring. In fact, as we speak, he's out on tour.
Yeah, I know he's got a holiday album out right now.
Exactly. How funny is that?
Yeah. Well, Zagaris, what nationality is that? I was curious.
Greek.
Oh,
Crete.
okay.
My grandmother and grandfather came from Crete. He tried to start a restaurant, then worked in the coal mines in Wyoming. He was killed in a coal mining accident.
Wow.
At that point in time, my dad joined the Army Air Force, and he was in a B-17 crew in England. When he came back, he moved my mom, because I was born in 45 while he was still over there. They moved us to Modesto because that's where all the Cretans were getting houses. And if you look at California, there's a big Cretan and Greek community in Modesto.
Mm.
If you go to Fresno, that's where all the Armenians were. Because there was produce, there were grapes, there were olives, all of that. And he started in the title business. Then, you're transferred as you move up. We went to Hanford. I was still little, but I remember Hanford was like almost farm country.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Stockton. I love Stockton. Then we moved to Reading. I think I was in the 7th grade. I didn't want to leave Stockton. I hated Reading. It was, at the end of the valley, it was like living in Neshoba, Mississippi in 1955. At that point, at that age, I didn't know what conservative, liberal was, but it was redneck. And like much of the valley, when you got to high school, you better be ready to throw down and fight every Friday and Saturday night at the dances or the parties. So my first 2 years, I went to Bellarmine, which was in San Jose. Jesuit school, played ball, had a great time. In fact, had such a good time. My grades were falling. My dad said, "Hey, I'm not paying this kind of money." so you can fuck around and go to ball games. So I went back to Reading, finished at Enterprise High School, had some good friends there, had the Valley experience, and then went to school in DC, George Washington University. I went on a football scholarship, signed a Soviet major. My plan at that time, and people laugh now, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to play 4 years of football. Then I'm going to maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years in the NFL. And then I'll run for Congress. Then I'll run for the Senate. Then I'll be president. And I started out working on the Hill. I was working for first Pierre Salinger, who was JFK's former press secretary until the assassination. And then he was appointed senator to California after Claire Engel died. So he was a senator. I was working on the Hill for him as, basically a glorified page. He was defeated by George Murphy. Pierre goes to Paris. I resume, and I'm still in school all this time. I'm playing football. I'm playing baseball. I'm taking 17 and a half units. Pierre comes back, calls, says, how's school going? I said, I'm doing really well. Playing a couple sports. And he said, how'd you like to go work on the Hill again? I said, 17 and a half units I'm carrying, and I'm playing 2 sports. I said, what would I be doing? He said, I could get you a job in Senator Kennedy's office. And I thought I meant Teddy at first. And I went, doing what? He said, basically what you were doing with me. And he said, wouldn't be Teddy, it would be Bobby. So I went, yeah. So I went back to work for Bobby, continued to play, graduated, wasn't drafted. I started Santa Clara Law School. I'm there for a month. And by that time, I realized, you know what? This isn't what I thought it was going to be. I don't think I want to do this, but I thought I'll finish out the year and see where I am after that. In February, McCarthy wins in New Hampshire. Bobby decides to run for the presidency. So I go stay in law school, but I go back to work for him in California. Started out at John Vasconcellos' office in Santa Clara. Ended up occasionally traveling around the Valley. Went up to Oregon during the primary. End up in Los Angeles the night of the primary, election primary in California. We're at the Ambassador Hotel, and we're up and we had like 4 suites. We're up there kind of watching the returns come in, and it soon looked like we were going to win. So we all go down into the ballroom. I remember we took like 3 different elevators, went through the kitchen, come onto the podium. Ballroom's crammed with people, low ceiling, a lot of enthusiasm. It was hot as hell. I remember I had a suit on. I was sweating. I was soaking wet. I'm kind of in the back. Bobby gives his speech. But now it's on to Chicago. Let's win there. I'm assuming we're going back upstairs. Somebody said, oh, there's some buses. I think the senators were going to go to another hotel where he's going to give a speech. As we start to leave and go back, what I thought was maybe upstairs or maybe to the buses, I'm just following people. As I got to the kitchen door, it sounded like somebody let out a string of firecrackers. My friend Bill Epridge, who was right behind me, he had been on and off the campaign trail, taking pictures for both Time and Life magazine. He, running by me, knocks me into the door, yelling 9mm, because when the shooting started, it sounded like somebody let out a string of firecrackers. And that's what I thought it was. And when he said 9mm, my first thought was, oh, that's like a fisheye lens. Didn't equate it with a gun at all. About 10 more steps, and I slipped, almost fell, because we're going back through the kitchen. And I'm thinking there's cooking oil. It was blood from Paul Schrade, the Union man that was behind Bobby. He was also shot. To make a long story short, it was pandemonium. I had to end up flying back from LAX to SFO early the next morning because I had a contracts final in law school. Drive to Santa Clara. When I got off the plane, I hear that Bobby had died in surgery. I was just numb. I go to class, sat down. I'm just kind of trying to process everything. I remember they passed out a mimeograph sheet, and I sat there for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes. I had a stack of like 7 blue books to answer the questions, and I took my wallet out and I kept 3 from the Topps baseball cards. They're these little squares, the size of a small card, wax head, headshots. I had a Juan Marichal, a Roberto Clemente, and I think a Willie Mays. But I pulled the Juan Marichal out. I put it on the first blue book, took a quarter out, transferred it, drew a little, balloon, and wrote, "Mike, this is all bullshit." And I proceeded to fill 8 blue books with how America was fucked and murdered its leaders. Well, that was the end of law school. My parents freaked. Said, "What the fuck?" My dad said, "Yeah, what are you going to do now, big shot?" I said, "I don't know, but I'll know when I see it," which is not what your dad wants to hear. I was immediately, and when I say immediately, like within a month, reclassified 1A, because this is now summer of 1968. Vietnam War is going. They're drafting people. And I thought, you know what? I'd read Huxley's Doors of Perception. I knew the Beatles had dropped acid when Revolver came out. Then I'm going to drop acid. And I wasn't dropping to get fucked up or to, party. I was at that point searching for truth, searching for self. And I knew this could be a key. Well, that first trip blew my mind in a great way. It was like the veil had been pulled back. It's like, this is what it's all about. Then I started hanging out at the Fillmore. I had always been into music from the time I was 7, 8 years old, always listened to the radio. Elvis was a big influence. I loved Ray Charles, James Brown. The Fillmore, Bill Graham, everybody thinks San Francisco scene. The Dead, Santana, The Airplane, Quicksilver, they were all great. The bands that really blew me out, all the English bands. And they were all coming over here. When I say the English bands, Cream, Dave Clark 5, Stones, Beatles, Peter Green was Fleetwood Mac. At that point, Fleetwood Mac, they were like if the Grateful Dead were a blues band. It was incredible. So I started writing a book on how the English musicians had come over here using mainly our blues roots, which most of us had never heard, and bringing their style and energy. And we're both changing our culture on the one hand, on the other hand, being changed by it. And that's what the book was all about. In those days, it was much like sports. There wasn't a lot of security. I'd go to the Fillmore. I'd have a tape recorder. I'd have a camera to take pictures the way you take pictures on a trip to document it. And I'd have 2 or 3 joints in my pocket, go backstage, meet the bands, hang out with them. We'd get high. I'd turn on the tape recorder. We'd just rap. And, you've got to realize too, at this point in time, we were all the same age. And even people, all these people that became big stars, they were kind of like, "Oh, fuck, man, this is fucking great. Can you believe it?" And they had this great sense of wonderment, much like I did. We were all having fun. And after about a year and a half, I'm at the point where I've done a lot of the interviews. I'm starting to now craft and write the book. Cream had broken up, but before they did, I had interviewed Clapton. Well, now Eric comes back with Delaney and Bonnie. He's staying at the South Toledo Inn. He loved it there because it didn't have telephones in the room, didn't have TV. He'd be kind of like recluse. I knew he'd like to stay there with Cream. So I just showed up, unannounced, knocked on the door. He opens it. "Say, man, what's up?" I said, "Hey, I brought our transcript from our last interview. And I said, I wanted you to go through it before I put anything in the book to make sure everything's okay. And, I've got some hash, we could smoke some hash and talk about this." So we end up, he's got the transcript. We smoked some hash. Now we're starting, we're high. We're starting to have the esoteric conversations you have when you're high. Like, oh, look at this bedspread. Oh, look at the patterns on it. It's great. And now he's reading the transcript. And I brought some proof sheets along that I was just going to mark while he was doing that. So I'd have something to do. So at one point he goes, hey man, what you got there? I said, oh, just proof sheets. He says, mind if I have a look? I said, yeah. So I gave him a proof sheet. I had a loop and I said, okay, Eric, just put the loop on the proof sheets and you can check it out. So he's going like this. All right. Oh, these are great. I said, Eric, if you actually put the loop on the proof sheet and your eye on the loop, you can actually see them. So now he starts looking again and he's going, oh, fucking hell. Oh, man, these are fucking great. He says, can we use these? I said, for what? He says, albums, songbooks. He says, look, man, we'll pay you. I went, wow. And he said, the writing's all right, but you should be doing this for a gig. Bam. That was it. I thought, that's what I'll do. And so a month later, Humble Pie comes into town. Peter Frampton and I were friends from the last time they came in. So I'm going to his room. I'm showing him his transcripts. We started talking. I tell him about what happened with Eric, and he goes, well, you've got to come to London. At that point in time, I'm teaching full-time substitute in East Palo Alto, the Ravenwood School District, basically teaching in the hood, junior high school. I said, look, man, I'd love to come to London. I don't have any money. He says, Mary and I have a place in St. John's Wood. I'm on the road a lot. She's modeling. You can stay with us. So this is summer of 1971. I fly over to London. He does have a place in St. John's Wood. He's about 4 blocks from Abbey Road Studios. Mary, his wife that I'd met the first time Humble Pie came over, she's not only a model, she's a big time model. Her best friend's Twiggy, Patty Boy. Patty's married to George Harrison. So I'm thrown into that scene. I'm going to parties, going to antique shows, meeting all of her friends, both in the modeling world, film world, rock and roll, the faces. Everybody knew each other. George Harrison and Peter were really close. I come back here, hit the ground running as a rock and roll photographer. I'd always missed sports, though. I hadn't done anything since I stopped playing in college. And I thought, you know what? I'd always gone to Niner games when I was a kid. At that point, I'd made my own passes, and this is in the 60s, and got on the field at Kezar. Not so much because I wanted to be a photographer and shoot. I just wanted to be close to the action. And I was playing at that, and I thought, I'm going to be down here myself soon. So I want to be on the ground floor. And so I'd make my own passes and I'd hang out. I missed that. So I remember George McFadden was the head of PR for the 49ers at the time. I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I want to shoot the 49ers. I'm doing a lot of rock and roll. And he goes, hey, the only people that can get on the field are people that are on assignment, either for a major newspaper, magazine, like, Pro Football Digest or Sports Illustrated. That's the only way we can do it. So I thought, you know what? I've got to find a way. I'll do what I did when I wanted to get on the Stones tour. I remember at Football Digest was a small little magazine. I got it, went through it. I saw Michael Herbert was the editor. It was out of Chicago. So now I called McFadden back as Michael Herbert. George McFadden, yes, this is Michael Herbert, editor of Football Digest. Michael, how you doing? I says, look, we've got this great young photographer, Michael Zagaris. We'd like to send him to camp. Need a credential for him. George goes, you know what? Tell him to go to United Airlines kiosk at SFO. We'll have a round trip plane ticket for him. At that point in time, the Niners their preseason practices were in Santa Barbara. So he can stay in the dorm for 3 days only, then come back. then call my office. We'll have a credential for him. That is how I started with the 49ers.
Wow.
At that point in time, they didn't have really a team photographer working for them, but they had somebody named Frank Rippon, who was an oil executive for Standard Oil, and he'd been shooting the 49ers really since their inception in 1946, was still working with them, would shoot the games, give them pictures, but he wasn't in their employee. So I came in, I started giving them pictures when I was shooting, along with sending pictures to not only Football Digest, but, all the magazines. And the Niners finally said, hey, we'll pay you for these pictures. I think I was getting initially $10 a picture that they ran in the programs. And I thought, oh man, I'm shitting in tall cotton now. And then the Morbido widows end up selling the team to the DeBartolo family. Hmm. They bring in a new PR guy, it's Dave Fry. I call him, tell him I'm the team photographer. I come in and he goes, hey, I got 3 people that have called. He has these pink slips. They say they're the new team photographer. They're the team photographer. I said, well, you ought to talk to him. And he said, well, what's your deal here? I said, I shoot every game home and away, which was not true. I just shot the home games. I said, the team pays for my, film and processing. And I get $300 a game. Didn't get any of that.
Wrote your own contract, basically.
Yeah. And he goes, well, can we just kind of keep the deal as it is right now? Maybe later I can get you more money. And I went, okay. And from then on, I was full time. I remember Eddie at DeBartolo, maybe mid 80s. He'd always come on the road when we'd be on the road. And we used to have a hospitality suite. We'd fly in like to the East Coast or Midwest games. We'd arrive at the hotel at 10 o'clock at night. There was a hospitality suite to take care of the reporters and people that travel with the team. It was always stocked with great food, open bar, and it was open Friday night till 2 in the morning, Saturday night till 2 in the morning. And it's basically, I look back on it now, hospitality on the one hand, but keep all these people away from the players. Well, he comes in one night about 1:30, 1:45. I'd just come back from a club. We got to talking. And he said, Mikey, how did you start out here? So I tell him the story I just told you. Most people would go, what? Get the fuck out of here. You're done. And he goes, you motherfucker. You motherfucker. And that was it. And this season is my 51st year.
You must be the longest Niner employee, right?
I think so. And as you know, now in any job, that's not necessarily a good thing. At some point, somebody goes, thank you for your service. Yeah. Here's a bronze-plated watch. Appreciate all you've done. So, but the Niners have been great. And when the York family came in, it was almost a seamless transition. They've been great. I'm still doing it. As I tell people, it's much like the A's. It's too late for a real job. But I've had a great time. And like I told you at the beginning, I've been fortunate to have been here in the Bay Area with the teams I love, being able to both chronicle all of this and be able to live it, to experience it. And there have been some incredible times. Yeah. And there have been some downtimes, as you know, being fans of both teams. It's not always World Series or Super Bowl. Yeah. I mean, the Niners, before Bill Walsh came, we had 2 years in a row, including Bill's first year, we were 2-14. And much like life, ebb and flow, which makes the winning all the sweeter.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like being a fan of the game or of certain teams, does that turn into better photos, or being a fan of a certain band that you're seeing live in person?
Well, with bands, with a few exceptions, I didn't work with anybody that I didn't want to be in the band with. And one of the reasons I started that was it wasn't about taking pictures. That was the camera was merely my entree. I wanted to be in the fucking band. I wanted to live that, but I couldn't play a guitar or drums good enough to be in a band. So what's the next best thing? The only people that are with the band all the time, the road managers. Occasionally the manager will come. Occasionally girlfriends or groupies. And the dope dealers. And occasionally a cameraman. And I thought, this is my entree. You play guitar, you play bass, I play camera. And it was great because I'd always taken pictures from the time I was 5 years old. And I've always approached it as a photojournalist. I've done the same thing with sports. I didn't want to just record. I wanted to shoot and document from the inside out. I wanted to use the Stanislavski approach, where I don't observe and capture and document. I am what I shoot. So I wanted to shoot music from the point of view of a musician, but I wanted to shoot it as photojournalism. That's why I wanted to shoot really more behind the scenes, in the locker room, on the plane, in the limo, in the hotel. I wanted to take people that see the pictures places they've never been. When you go to the concert or you go to the games, you're there, you see that. You don't get the experience, the full experience. The same with football, same with baseball. I want people that see the pictures to get the feeling that they're actually a player. This is what a player sees. Mm-hmm. This is what a player goes through. That's what Field of Play is all about. I mean, as many action pictures as there are, there's so many locker room shots. There's so many bench shots. It's the drama. It's guys getting shot up pregame or halftime. This is what players go through. It's the pathos. You see guys in contemplation before a game. You see them on the bench, cuts over their nose. That's the game, and that's what I wanted to really bring out and show people.
Well, I've always wondered, they're always really cool photos when you see musicians or athletes, like you said, kind of talking behind the scenes or doing that kind of thing. How do you blend in? Like, do they know you're taking the picture, or how do you kind of turn into like an invisible man almost?
When I started with music, I came in, and I never went to school for this. And the way I approach it, they never teach that in school. I think it's kind of who I am. I'm part of you. We are in this. And when I did rock and roll, I was just like the bands. I wasn't shooting. I was shooting, but when the joints went around, it's like, or I brought my own, or the conversations, everything they did, I did. Not because I was trying to copy them. That's who I was. And had I been a musician, I would have been doing all that anyway. With football and with baseball, I never approached it as a fan. Like, oh, this is John Brody. Fuck. I approached it as when I played. These are guys. These are my teammates. These are people I played with. When Bill Walsh came, he had been in the building 2 weeks. I went and basically had a meeting with him. And you could still do things like that in those days. There weren't layers and layers of people you had to go through. I told him what I wanted to do. I said, Coach, I think the fact that you're here, this is going to be very special. I think there's going to be history made here. And I want to document it as history, as a historian. But in order to do that, I'm going to have total access. And when I say total access, I mean, I want to be at practices. I want to be in the locker room. I want to be on the bench. I want to be there from pregame to halftime to postgame. I want to document it all. He listened, and I knew that he was a man of letters. He was well read. he was a historian and he was into it. And he said, you know, I get what you're trying to do. What if you go too far? I said, Coach, you know what? Honestly, inevitably, I probably will go too far. I said, all you have to do is just look at me and I'll know to back off. And you know what? With Bill, when he gave you that look and it'd be like, he could freeze you. Mike Ditka used to go out, like sometimes meet his quarterback 10 yards onto the field, grab him, but, you know, yell and scream. Bill never did that. He just had that icy stare. And that was worse than Ditka or anybody screaming, yelling. So we had that. When I first started doing that, the first 2 games, I'd come in on the first bus. I had my own locker. I'd get undressed like I'm getting ready to play the game. I'd sometimes walk around with just a jock and a half t-shirt and a camera. The first couple of weeks, guys are like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me, Z? After that, you're invisible. You're with them. And some guys will mug for the camera, but other guys, you know, they're into their space. You also have to know sometimes, whether it's like a family or a relationship or friends, there are times people do need their space and you have to read it. And if you don't, shit can come down.
Yeah.
So that's how I've always approached it.
Were you also the guy who has to assemble everyone for team photo day? That looks like that might be a hard job.
You know, it is hard. I only did that a few times, and that's not my thing. And that's totally different from what I do.
Yeah.
And in the Bay Area, Ron Yeri, that used to play for the Vikings, he had a company out of Santa Rosa. That's all they did. They did a lot of the high schools. They did most of the colleges, and they did some of the pro teams. And he'd bring in his own risers, the lighting, and usually 2 or 3 people. And I let them do it. It's like, yeah, this is all you. No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, something that's more fun than team photo day too is one of my favorite photos of yours. I see it literally every time at the Fillmore. I take a moment to look at it. The Who, that final note photo that's hanging in the
Oh,
Fillmore.
yeah.
What's the story behind that? You've told me before, and it's a good one.
Well, I mean, the Who, that was their last stop before they went back to London. And then they ended up coming back out here one more time. But so we're at Winterland. It's the last show. I'm backstage with them. Guys are going in and out. I'm kneeling on the floor, loading film into my cameras. And Keith Moon, the drummer, comes in and goes, "Hey, mate, I've got a surprise for you." And he pulls up this plastic bag. I look up and it looks like he's got pieces of jerky in the bag. And I said, "Jerky?" He goes, "Jerky?" Opens it up, pulls out this big withered black mushroom. This is magic mushroom, isn't it? Went, oh, wow. Tears it in half, eats half of it. Remember, he had a Budweiser, some beer can, throws it down. He says, "You fancy some, mate?" I said, "Mooney, I've got to fucking shoot the show." And he says, "And I've got to play me fucking drums." So he holds it out again. I'm thinking, I'm chewing it. It's bitter as hell. Wash it down. 5 minutes later, we leave the dressing room. We're going up on the stage. We get to the stage. We're going up the stairs. I pull the back of his shirt and I said, "Mooney, what kind of trip's this going to be?" And he goes, "Don't know." So the show starts. Kristen and I go out in the front, and at Winterland, they had 2, they were like video monitor boxes about 15 feet off the stage to stage left and right. So I jump into one and I'm shooting, and maybe 3/4 of the way through the show, at some point, I kind of not forgotten, but stopped thinking about the mushrooms, and I'm shooting. And now I'm starting to feel, you know, like kind of, whoa, my mouth's getting dry. Now I'm starting to sweat. Now I'm starting to get anxious. And at one point, Kristen's handing me another camera body, and I see these like trails. And I'm like, and she goes, are you okay? I said, actually, I'm kind of coming on. I said, Mooney and I did some mushrooms. She goes, mushrooms? You didn't give me any? And I said, you weren't there. So now I'm trying to keep it together. Now I'm really getting high. And I said, hey, you know what? Starting to feel anxious. I said, let's split. Let's go up. Let's go up on stage. So we go backstage, go up on the stage, we're on the side. I'm trying to shoot. Now I'm really getting high. I'm really starting to trip. And I'm thinking in my mind, hey, I want to get off on this floor. I don't want to get any higher. But that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, you know what? I said, it's too claustrophobic up here. This is too weird. I said, let's go to the balcony because there's nobody up in the balcony. So we go to the balcony, and it's literally, I'm looking down on the whole stage. I had no sense of time, place, or space. Kristen tells me at some point, she's like, looks over him and she goes, hey, are you shooting this? And I'm like, at my camera. I started taking a couple pictures. At that point, Pete throws the guitar up in the air. I get this incredible picture. I mean, now I'm aware I'm shooting, but I'm sky high, 8 miles high. And Moon stands up on his drum kit and collapses into the drums. Drums, cymbals go over. He's lying on his back. Pete grabs him by one ankle, Ant Whistle by the other. They drag him off. That's the end of the show. That shot, as Kristen continually reminds me, you wouldn't have gotten that shot without me. I said, yeah, no kidding. So that's the story of that shot.
Oh, man, that's a great story. And so you've mentioned the Rolling Stones earlier, and since I forgot to tell you, I grew up in Tracy, so not too far from Modesto and Stockton.
In Altamont.
Yeah, so I had to ask, were you
Yeah.
there at Altamont for that
Yeah.
epic show or
Oh,
disaster?
yeah, it was. And I was there, and I started the day. We came with some people. I remember we parked on some side road on a trail and walked in the dark about 4 a.m. Got to the stage. They were still building the stage, and it was December. It was foggy. It was cold as hell. Everybody, and when I say everybody, I mean fucking everybody. Everybody was tripping. Wherever you went, people were handing you pipes, joints, chillums. As you handed a joint, somebody else gave it to somebody else. Somebody else was handing you one. As you walk through the crowd, people would be walking toward you like, hey, man. And it was like crazy. So now I'm on the side of the stage waiting. The Stones hadn't arrived yet. The Burrito Brothers were they were the first band to play. They were in a trailer. The Hells Angels are there, and the Gypsy Jokers from San Jose were there. They were on opposite sides of the stage. Not friends. Somebody came up with 2 giant plastic jars, the kind you'd see in high school in the lunchroom, that one would be filled with mayonnaise, one would be filled with mustard, except these jars, one was filled with whites, speed, the other with reds. And the Angels they had their bikes like parked against the stage, and they were already partying. Angels were coming up, taking 3 and 4 whites, 3 and 4 reds, throwing them down with Red Mountain. And I had dropped some acid, and people were doing mushrooms, people were doing psilocybin, and I thought, you know what? Things are going to get real weird real fast. I don't think I'm going to stay here on the stage. So I went on the stage is here. There was where the racetrack is, and that's like a bowl.
Yeah.
I went right up on the side of the track because you could look right down on the stage and you were close. And I thought, well, ended up there were 300,000 people, and it was pandemonium. When the fight started, the Angels started beating people with pool cues. Remember, there's this big fat Mexican guy naked trying to dance, and he knocked over a bike. About 4 guys beat him down with pool cues, and now the crowd's like, oh shit. And again, everybody's really stoned. By the time the Stones came on, it was like 4:30 or 5. It was past dusk. It's getting dark. The Angels officers had had a meeting in, I heard Richmond, officers meeting. They showed up, maybe 25 of them, their bikes, and they came through the back of the crowd. Sonny Barger was in the lead, wearing a bear's head and kind of, on his head. The crowd parted and people were offering him joints and wine. And I thought, this is what it must have been like in Paris when the Nazis marched in, where everybody fucking hated him, but greeted him like they were the conquerors. And halfway through the show, there was more shit. When the guy got shot, I didn't, there was a gunshot, and then he was stabbed. I saw something, but I didn't know what I was seeing. But at that point, I thought, you know what? Fuck this. We're out of here. And I remember we went up to the top of the thing, and there was a fence. And I remember crawling over the fence, and I'm tripping all this time, and fell. And there were people on the other side of the fence. There were fires going on. And I thought, this is like the party the night before the last crusade. And everybody was fucked up. I remember it took 2 hours to even find our car.
Wow.
Got home. I think I got 3 hours sleep. Then I had to drive to San Francisco and pick up Peter Frampton and Mary. They had played, Humble Pie had played that night at the Fillmore, and they were supposed to open for the Dead. Well, the Dead were at Altamont, never played. They left, never came back to San Francisco. So Peter said, so we had to play 2 sets. When I picked him up at the hotel, I'm still like, yes. So how was it? It must have been great, right? And I went, no, man, it was like the end of the world. So I remember taking them to Tamalpais. We went all the way to the top of Tamalpais to just try to mellow out. That was Altamont for me.
Wow. So you probably get some good memories then every time you drive down to LA and kind of see it on that right-hand side.
Yeah, because as soon as you pass,
Yeah.
you know what, too? It looks the same, but it looks different. It looks, when I look now where the stage was and everything, I thought, God, it's hard to believe there were 300,000 people here.
Well, people drive by and little do they know all the history, It just looks like an empty racetrack. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
They'd put a sign or something,
Well, you know what? The further you get away from it, like I'm 78. Half of the people that were at Altamont are probably dead now. And I'm saying that as a fact.
Yeah.
And if you haven't lived through it, either if you weren't there or young and read about it and knew the history, you wouldn't know it at all. And you could probably say the same thing about a lot of the Civil War battlefields in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. They just look like farmland now.
Yeah, makes sense. It makes me wonder, though, is there a history or a story, to your first camera that you did buy? Do you still have it? Any special memories with that?
No, the first camera I had was my dad's, and it was an Ansco camera. I don't have it. And you know how some people keep everything?
Yeah.
I go through cameras the way the Apaches went through horses. And you might meet some photographers, they'll have 3 or 4 cameras, and they look like they took them out of the box. A month after I've got a camera, it looks like I've been in Quezon with it, or, in Desert Storm.
Yeah. So it's like a broken in running shoe by that point.
Exactly.
Well, you hear stories about comedians, everything's a bit and it's hard for them to turn it off. Is that kind of how you are as a photographer? Like, are you always seeing, oh, that'd be a good photo, or oh, this would be a great lighting for this? Or are you able to separate yourself from it?
I can separate myself sometimes, but I've always, that's how people say, how do you do this? How do you do that? I won't say I don't know. They're all stream of consciousness. I walk into something and I've got a rough plan if I'm shooting a game, but it's basically what I'm seeing and what the picture is, and you're composing it on the spot. And well, that's because I approach it all as photojournalism. If you're doing product photography or if you're a portrait photographer, that's totally different. Then you really do have to prepare. You have to have lighting or a light man. You have to do all this. That's not the way I operate.
Mm.
And people say, well, how can you do what you do? I said, some of the great things in life you just do. I mean, you can talk to some people about hitting. The really great hitters, it doesn't translate. And they can't even, they know why it's a feel, but it's hard to verbalize it or even write it down.
Yeah.
And that's been my approach with what I do.
Well, it must be fun too, since so much of your work has been in the Bay Area, right? With some of these great bands. Do you kind of drive around and think, oh, that's where I shot this person, that's where I shot that person? Like, do you have any Bay Area landmarks in your mind?
No, I mean, and I've done it long enough that that's all I'd be doing if I actually I thought that. Well, you know what's hard now when you drive past things that are no longer there.
uh,
Candlestick, no longer there. Fillmore West, no longer there. Winterland, no longer there. Gone. And it shows you. And the longer you live, that's how life is. And I tell people the one constant on the planet is change.
mm,
And if you can't adapt to change and change slowly yourself, you're done.
mm,
I mean, I had to go from digital or from still to digital, I thought, what? Fuck no, I'm not doing that.
mm,
Well, guess what? Life doesn't wait for you to change. This is happening. You either get on board or you're going to be left behind.
mm.
Me having a lot of people say, what? How come you don't shoot film anymore? It's like, what? I won't say nobody shoots it, but nobody that works
Mm.
unless you're a person with money, wealthy, and an artist. Everything is about digital. And so you have to do that. If, me trying to do what I do now in any sphere, shooting film only, that would be like you or me showing up to Indy with a horse. Hey, I want to be in the race. It's like, fuck out of here.
Do you ever, I mean, you've had so many great stories today, so many great connections through the years. Do you ever meet people maybe that don't know you that well and they probably think you're full of crap almost? Like, can you kind of tell? They're like, oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, and you know what? I understand. I mean, sometimes when I'm telling a story, I'll think, for most people and the way how most people's lives are, this is like, as somebody said, dude, you're fucking Forrest Gump. You know, yeah, I don't, never planned that.
Hmm.
And that's why when I started out, I've been so lucky. I mean, I work hard. I have invented some of these things that I do and made some of the things, happen. But most of all, I was lucky to have been born where I was born, when I was born, that I had supportive parents. And a lot of this stuff just happened. And I firmly believe, I don't think there are any coincidences. I think things happen the way they're supposed to. Um, and in that sense, I've been incredibly fortunate. Um, I just as easily could have been born in Cabrini Green, not knowing who my parents were from day one, hard scrabble life, fighting for everything. That's why when I see all the shit around me, my first thought is I'm lucky. The second thing is, you know what? You have to give back. You're, for lack of a better word, you're blessed that you're able to do all of this. And a lot of people say, oh, you made this happen. It's like, when the door was open, I walked in and I worked hard. But no, there's so much more. And you know what? A lot of it I don't understand. Um, I was raised a Catholic, but I think all religion's bullshit now. I think, I mean, I'm more into spirituality, and the more I know, I find out the more I don't know.
Mm.
With knowledge, rather than more answers, It merely raises more questions. Um, but listen, you're lucky. Look
Yeah.
what you do, and look where you are.
Hmm.
Look where you could be.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that. I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I just learned that hard work and a little bit of luck can go a long way.
Yeah. I mean, when you and I think we're having a bad day, know this. Most people, most people on the planet would look at you or look at me and trade their best day for our worst and know they ripped us off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, who are like in your mind some of the most photographic people? And is there anyone that you haven't gotten to or wish you got the photograph that maybe you didn't get to? Because I think of like Lenny Kravitz, Prince. They're very photogenic. I don't know if you've worked with them.
You know what? I wanted to shoot Prince when he first started. They were playing on Broadway, wouldn't let me shoot. And my first thought then was, you know what? Fuck you.
Yeah.
But great artist. And Joel Bernstein, who's a good friend of mine, he shot him a little, but he was his guitar tech. And I was like,
Mhm.
what? Um, if you could go back in time, what would you do? I would have loved to have shot Elvis
Mm.
before he went in the army, like Alfred Wertheimer, that I met. And Alfred shot him just 10 days. And those are arguably the best pictures of Elvis ever taken.
Wow.
Or Ray Charles in 1955, 1956. Because no matter what you do and how cool it is, you can always go, yeah, but look at that. Fuck, if I would have loved to have been Jacques Lowe with JFK
Mm.
the first couple of years in the White House. But I mean, look, saying all that, when I look at what I've done, it's like
Yeah.
anybody else would go, hey, you know what? Shut up.
Well, what's the best compliment? This might be a hard answer, but do you have a best compliment you've received from someone you admire, whether it's an athlete or a musician, on your work?
I've received a few.
Yeah.
I don't remember because I've always kind of listen. We all want people to acknowledge us for a job well done,
Hmm.
but I've always felt you can't dwell on that, and I've always felt like thanks. It's not about me, and people said, "Oh no, you've got to stop and smell the roses." So I can't. I mean, I know a lot of my friends in both sports and music. They've written things and all that. It's hard for me to acknowledge. I mean, I feel great, but I don't want to think about it. I think if you really get into that, that'll fuck you up. I think the biggest payment is that I'm still able to do what I do mostly the way I want to do it. And that's what means the most to me.
Hmm.
And when I've done the books, I've had friends in both music and sports that have stepped up to help in so many ways. And to me, that's the biggest compliment of all. I mean, Joe has been over backwards to help me out. And he didn't have to do that.
Mm.
He's never asked for any money. I mean, he's Ricky Henderson, different guy, but Ricky's the same way. Ricky's really cool.
Mm.
And now I mentioned both of those. I could mention 25 or 30 people. Ronnie Lott, um, Peter Frampton, Clapton. I mean, it's as much about people that you grow with in your job. I mean, think you continue to be a firefighter, move up 25, 30 years, the people that you're still doing it with, you've all had shared, you might be doing different tasks in your job, but you're all in this together. And it's like a team. That, you know what? That's why I still do this. That's why players don't want to leave. That's why the Stones are still touring. Everybody's, oh, it's about the money. The money, but more importantly, it's about the camaraderie.
Yeah.
To me, doing this, it's like I remember talking to Tito Francona in April because he goes, Z, how much longer are you going to fucking do this? I said, Tito, I go year to year as long as it's fun. And then I said, not only that, I said, you know why I do this? Because of this right here. You and me in the clubhouse pregame, or in the dugout, or on the field. I said, fuck, man, this is like, it's like we're still in high school. It's like we've never had to grow up. One player I remember said to me once, at one point, he said, hey, man, what other kind of job can you have? Will you come in here from 8 in the morning till midnight and you're hanging with your boys and talking about pussy and about sports? Don't get no better than that. And I said, no shit, that's it. And that is it. I mean, imagine, listen, in the firehouse, you could be the CEO at Chevron. You wouldn't have the fun that
Yeah.
you have with your guys, or
Hmm.
the stories when you guys are cooking and just hanging.
Yeah. Like you
And
said,
we're still up. Yeah.
yeah, the camaraderie, it makes everything happen. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I'm at the stadium, I see some similarities too, like you just alluded to in your story. And you're walking on the field, you're in the dugout, like you were saying. It kind of almost feels like, wait, am I in the Field of Dreams sequel? Or, it's too good to be true sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's why we do it.
Yeah.
That's exactly why we do it.
Well, Michael, it means a lot to have you on the show, and it's been a lot of fun being able to talk about some of my favorite things, sports and music. So it's
Yeah.
been great hearing about your career, and thanks for all the stories, and thanks for the time.
Well, you know what? If you want to do it again sometime, you've got the number, because
Awesome.
the stories you got were just the tip of the
Yeah.
iceberg.
Well, I was gonna say, I figure you in your house, do you have everything on display or like an unofficial museum going on? Because I was like, I want to check that out.
I mean, I've got, you know what? I've got a lot of my things, but I've got a lot of my friends' things too, because I
Oh,
don't
okay.
I don't need to be in an echo chamber. I mean, I've
Yeah.
got Wertheimer's pictures of Elvis. I've got
Wow.
Walter Yost. I've got all kinds of different things.
Awesome. Well, what's the plan for the rest of the day? What do you got going on? I know you're getting ready to go to the Niner game on this weekend.
Yeah, we leave on Friday to go to Jacksonville, and from here on out, I think it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just the way the league is, every game, regardless of who you're playing, it comes down to matchups, headspace of the group,
Yeah.
how healthy you are. I mean, all those things. And, everybody thought, we're slam dunk for the Super Bowl. We're not.
Yeah. We got humbled a
Nobody.
little bit.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, too? It's going to come down to the momentum that we have and the health of our players
Hmm.
for that playoff run, and luck.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Like you said,
I
that's
mean,
always the key element. You need a little bit of luck.
yeah. I mean, I felt, and everybody on the team to a person felt, we would have beaten the Eagles if Brock hadn't gone down, but he
Yeah.
did. And
Hmm.
that's nothing. That's to take nothing away from the Eagles.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how life is. Sometimes, you know, you're bowling along and you get cancer
Hmm.
and you overcome it or you die. And there's no fairness in any of it.
Yeah.
And I think sports is just kind of the same way.
No, I agree. And awesome. Thanks, man. Well, thanks for giving me some time.
This has been a mutual thing. And you know what? This was meant to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you were persistent, and that's a lot of it. And you know what? I'm glad that you kept doing this, and I'm glad I followed up. This has
Awesome.
been fun.
Excited to run into you maybe at an A's game or whenever we run into each other again.
Yeah, that's a whole other movie.
Yeah.
I'm hoping the owners slam the door on this guy.
Like it just seems morally wrong too. So
Well, if you know what, if you look at the history of ownership in sports, the good owners are an anomaly, and the good owners in all major sports,
hmm
if you from the beginning of what you and I know, the late 1800s to this present day, if you could find 10 or 12 really good owners that love the sport and take care of their people and the fans, if you find 10, let me
yeah. I'll have Joe Lacob call you.
know. Well,
Yeah, he's an anomaly.
he's, I mean, please buy the team, except
Yeah.
first of all, the other guy has to sell the team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Michael, I'm actually in LA. I'm going to the Hollywood Improv tonight, so I came down to see some comedy shows. So,
Oh, cool.
so I'm in your family's
Dynamite.
neck of the woods. I'm at the Roosevelt Hotel right now. That's where I'm staying.
Hollywood Roosevelt. God, if
Yeah,
those walls could talk.
exactly. I'm actually
That,
set up in the room. I was trying to find a good spot that made it look like not in a hotel room.
wow. Well, maybe where you're sitting right now, Lana Turner was hanging.
Yeah. I get In and Out Burger, then I sit out by the pool sometimes till like 2 in the morning hoping for a ghost, but never happens.
Maybe you need to do some mushrooms.
You ever do MDMA or Molly or anything like that?
Never did. I have, you know what? I have not done psychedelics for 40 years,
Mm.
and I've thought about doing mushrooms again. What I wanted to do was DMT.
I've heard
And
of that.
I heard lots of stories over about a 10-year period from different people that would come back from Burning Man. And then there was a book by I think Rick Strass on DMT, where he actually was part of a government funded
Hmm.
thing on it. And Johnny Marr, he had a trip, he told me about it. So I read the book, I gave it to our team doctor, Alan Pont, who was also at that point in time my primary care physician. And I said, read this, let's talk. So Alan read it in 3 days, came back and
Wow.
goes, I know why you wanted me to read this. You want to do this, right? I said, I'm looking at it. I'm kind of, and he said, well, two things. First of all, your heart rate and your blood pressure go off the dial. He
Hmm.
said, you almost OD'd in 83 twice. And the second time they told, the first time they said, hey, we didn't save you, but you've probably always been allergic to all canes. So you can't do any more Coke or anything. And I went, what?
Wow.
They went, what? Yeah, no, you've probably always been allergic, but now your body's reached its toxicity level. If you do any more, you can die. And I
Yeah.
said, what do you mean if I do any more, I can die? And they're like, bro, well, maybe you can do 2 lines and be okay. You might do a line and OD.
Wow.
So I went a month, and I believed him. And I was on Broadway. Everybody was tweaked out. I was in the back at the soundboard. I'd smoked a joint, had a couple of beers, and I'm kind of like, and the guy at the soundboard goes, bro, need a 1 and 1? He lays out 2 big lines. And I said, no, man, I can't. He goes, you can't? What do you mean? So I told him the story. And he goes, I'm sure 1 line is not going to kill you. And I thought, so I took one of the lines, because he put out 2 lines, put it back to him. And then the 1 line that was left, I cut in half and went. Within 30 seconds, I started getting that like a tingling here, like when I almost OD'd. And then I started getting like a pull, like you're starting to have a stroke.
Yeah.
And I remember I was having like trouble breathing. And I remember grabbing him by the shoulder, and he turned and goes, ha, 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 ha. It's pretty good shit, huh? And the next thing I knew, literally waking up in ICU, tubes in my nose, one in my mouth, and one of the same doctors looking down on me like, what the fuck?
Wow.
And that was it. That was like, oh, okay, I got it. And you and me both know I was fucking lucky.
Yeah.
I could have just as easily have OD'd. And so with that as a backdrop, and Alan knew the story. He said, look, I know you want to do this and you want me to tell you you can do it. He said, honestly, I don't know what'll happen. He said, if you're 19 or 20, this isn't an amusement park ride. This is like a fucking rocket into outer space. He said, now you can do this and get through all this and maybe have this incredible trip, or you can fucking OD. And he said, I don't know. And I'm not telling you that to scare you. I'm telling you that it's a fact. I don't know. He
Yeah.
said, are you willing to fucking roll the dice? He said, you surf too. You can go surf a 60-foot wave. You could have the fucking ride of your life, or you might wipe out and that might be it. He said, when you're young, you don't give a shit. And it's not like you don't give a shit. You all those things could happen. but not to you.
Yeah.
And he said, but you're older now and you know that it could happen to you. So, and that's why I haven't done DMT.
Maybe I'll stay away from it too. Then it sounds a little intense.
Well, you know what? It is. But if you read the book and you heard the stories I heard,
Mm-hmm.
you don't hallucinate. You go into a parallel universe.
Yeah, you see like the Big Bang or something, right?
Everybody that they're aliens. They're entities from other dimensions. And it's not in your mind. This really happens.
Wow.
And it's, I'm reading that. I'm like, oh, fuck. Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
and you always think it's like when people say, oh, if a flying saucer came down, I'd go, hey, bro, can I get aboard? And a wise person will go, really? So you think that everything in the universe is benevolent? We're held together. Atoms, our bodies, everything in space is yin and yang, positive and negative, plus and minus. You don't know.
Yeah. Like you said, the more you know, the more questions.
Yeah, no shit. Exactly.
Cool.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, this was fun, man. I'll look forward to seeing you around, and hopefully I'll see you at some Niner games this year.
I used to have a grip pass, and that all changed 3 years ago when the NFL took over. Like I used to have players, Frampton was on the field with me. I'd have different players. We'd hang out. Now each team gets 25. They're the armbands.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to divvy those up between our video crew, our photographers, our social media. So the party's over.
Gotcha.
Right. I have you on there. I mean, now I always tell people, I said, you know what? I'm going to be down in the field. It's a fucking bad place to watch the game.
Mm.
It's a great place to feel the game. It's just like when you're playing.
Yeah.
You don't know half the time. I mean, you miss a block and you're on your, as a linebacker, guide float out. You're like this, all of a sudden you're on the ground and you hear the crowd roaring. All you know is you didn't make the tackle. And then you're thinking, oh, fuck, I have to sit with the team tomorrow and watch this on film. And they're going, hey, Ryan, nice fucking hit. Way to make the play.
Yeah. Awesome. Safe travels to Jacksonville.
If I don't, you'll read about it.
Yeah, that's true. All right, man. Have a good one. Thank you.
You too. Later.